All right, guys, how you doing? Today, we're going to talk about Herbert Spencer, or at least I'm going to start to talk about Herbert Spencer for you. Probably going to do this in a couple of segments. But for this one, I thought I would just give you a kind of an introduction to Herbert Spencer and a sort of an overview of his social theory. So we are talking about this surly looking SOB here. Herbert Spencer lived from 1820 to 1903. British social philosopher, also an economist, sociologist, political theorist, biologist. I think he even made a contribution to astronomy. So, very well read and influential figure in natural science and social scientific thought. Um, and I think, maybe one place to start here would be to remember what Ashley and Ornstein say, right, about theory in their opening chapter. Is that when they're defining what we mean by the classical tradition, they say that, one of the things that all of those theories have in common, those 19th century foundational theories, is that they have ideological significance of some kind, right? They're ideological in nature. And I think this is certainly true of, I got an itchy back. This is certainly true of Spencer, okay? So think about it like this. You had uh, Emile Durkheim, okay, one of our founders, right? Emile Durkheim. And Emile Durkheim is a functionalist, uh, organic analogy, all that stuff, right? He's a functionalist, but he says something like, we need a scientific, a positivist understanding of society in order to inform social reform, right? So maybe we can think of him as kind of in line with progressive reformers of the 19th century. Then you have Karl Marx all the way over there on the other side, right on the left. And Marx is a socialist revolutionary, and he's going to advance something that he's going to call scientific socialism, because we have to have a scientific understanding of capitalism, and that will stand in the service of the revolutionary overthrow of the capitalist system, right, which is highly exploitative and all that, right? So there's Marx's ideology, and then we have Herbert Spencer, and Herbert Spencer is also ideological. He is going to represent a version of conservatism, right? He's going to be, in fact, a lot of times we can think of his theory as having or being an ideological justification for laissez-faire capitalism, and I don't think it's any coincidence that people like uh, Andrew Carnegie, right? Andrew Carnegie and Herbert Spencer were friends. They used to fish together in Scotland. But Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller, and let's see if we can think of another one. The Mellon and all those guys, right? DuPonts, right? All those people, a lot of the, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them were highly influenced by Herbert Spencer's social thought. And one of the reasons why they were was because, well, Herbert Spencer's social thought is going to provide a sort of ideological justification for why those people should be running things, and so it's really, a defense of their existence in a lot of ways. So, yes, so Herbert Spencer, the social conservative, the political conservative. Um, Now, where do we go from there? Well, I'm knocking everything over here, but where do we go from there? So, what I want to do is kind of give you a bit of an overview of his theory, a bit of an overview of his work here, his social thought, and then we're going to move on from there. I'm going to get a little bit go into a little bit more depth. Okay. So there's a few points we want to make. All right. So the first one is, again, he's a functionalist. He's a structural functionalist. So what does that mean? Well, it means organic analogy. He believes in the organic analogy. Society is like society is like a living organism. It's made up of these different structures, these different specialized structures, and all of those structures have a function, and they all kind of work together in a coordinated way, and that the tendency of society is toward progress and toward order, right, and stability. So the organic analogy, society is like a living organism. And then another big part of his theory is social evolution. He makes a really big deal about social evolution. Another thing functionalists talk about, go back to Auguste Comte, and Spencer read Comte. And, what did Comte say? Well, societies evolve from simple to complex forms in the direction of social progress. And Spencer's going to say basically the same thing. He's going to talk about social evolution in a different way. There's going to be there's a place where, Spencer is going to part company with Auguste Comte, but they both are going to say societies evolve from simple to complex forms in the direction of social progress. And then remember, I even used that phrase, through structural differentiation. So we'll get back to that. So Herbert Spencer, organic analogy, and what else? Evolution, right? Evolution. Now, Spencer, given that he's a man of the 19th century, I got to tell you about another one of his friends, okay? Another one of his friends was a guy named Charles Darwin. Charles Darwin, as you know, evolution by means of natural selection, right? So in the world of biology. And, him and Spencer are buddies. Him and Spencer are, they know each other. And Spencer is going to come to talk about social evolution in a way similar, maybe drawing on, right, the vocabulary of Darwinian evolution, okay? So social evolution. Societies evolve from simple to complex forms in the direction of social progress through the process of structural differentiation, and that they evolve in Spencer's terms, right? From Spencer's point of view, they evolve from lower, right, to higher, more civilized forms, okay? Everybody good? And that the way that he's going to talk about social evolution, the way that he's going to talk about society, and so on, is going to come to be known as social Darwinism. Okay, social Darwinism, because there's such a similarity between the way that he talks about society and the way that Darwin talked about the evolution of species. And one of the ways that Spencer talked about social evolution, the evolution of societies, is he's going to say that social evolution is a natural process, right? It's a natural process, and it should not be interfered with. Don't interfere with it. Leave it alone, right? Leave that process alone. Societies are evolving toward societies are evolving in the direction of progress. Leave it alone, okay? And in fact, he is going to be openly anti-reform, right? He's going to be openly anti-reform. He will even testify before Parliament about why, what we would today call welfare measures are actually detrimental to social progress, and he's going to be against even things like child labor laws and any attempt, right, to regulate society. Okay, everybody all right with that? You got that so far? Okay. Yeah, we'll come back to that idea because I remember I showed you that picture of him. I don't have it up here. Let me get that. I'm gonna get that picture back one more time here. Hold on. Here he is. There's old Herbie. All right. He looks a little bit like Ebenezer Scrooge, in the Christmas Carol. And maybe we'll say something about that a little bit later on. Okay. Ebenezer Scrooge, in a lot of ways, talks like Herbert Spencer. Well, before Ebenezer Scrooge, saw the light, right? That he talks a lot like Herbert Spencer. Well, maybe we'll say something about that a little bit later on if I remember. Okay, so social Darwinism. So why do we call this social Darwinism? Well, I'm gonna go through it. All right, I'm gonna introduce you to the very basic idea behind it, and listen for some stuff that sounds like Charles Darwin. Okay, so here we go. So here's Herbert Spencer. Society is a struggle for existence. Okay, society is a struggle for existence. Individuals in society are in competition with each other for resources. So we're all competing with each other, right, for resources. Okay, so if we think about a society is individuals competing with each other. Okay, eventually, out of this competition, the most capable people are going to rise to the top. The fittest, right, are going to rise to the top. The most capable. They're going to move to the top of the social hierarchy. And the less capable are going to sink to the bottom, or they're going to die out. Okay. And that fact, that idea that the most capable rise to the top and the least capable sink, fall, or die, that is what leads to social progress. Because it always assures that society is being led by the most talented, by the most brilliant people, right? Maybe you get an idea now why folks like Andrew Carnegie, and Rockefeller, right? Why they were such fans of Herbert Spencer, because basically what is implied in Spencer's theory is that the wealthy are wealthy because they are the best people, right? They are the best people. Okay. So the most capable rise to the top, the least capable fall or die. That's what leads to social progress. And so helping the poor, right? Helping the poor would only interfere with that, right? Helping the poor would only interfere with that. So Spencer is saying that the principle, right? The principle that guides social development is, here you go, the survival of the fittest. Okay. So where have you heard that phrase before, right? Survival of the fittest. You heard it from Charles Darwin, right? Now, we have a little story we like to tell about that phrase, okay? And it's this. And I know that there might be a little bit of controversy over this, but I know at least the sociologist James Henslin, I think, agrees with this idea here. And that is that the phrase survival of the fittest was originally coined not by Charles Darwin, but by Herbert Spencer. And that Herbert Spencer used it to talk about society. And then Darwin borrowed it to talk about nature. Okay. So you get the idea. It's very, we hear that phrase, survival of the fittest, and that strikes us as Darwinian thought, okay, a Darwinian idea. All right. So, again, Herbert Spencer is saying helping the poor, right, reform, only interferes with the natural process of evolution that leads to social progress. And I said that he sounds a little bit like old Ebenezer Scrooge. So you think about, I don't know how many people have seen the Christmas Carol, or how many of you read it, but I'm sure at some point in your life, maybe you've seen one of the many, many movie versions of Christmas Carol. And Charles Darwin in the very beginning, right? You got these guys that are going around, they're collecting for charity. Remember that? And they come up to they come up to Ebenezer Scrooge and they say, would you like to contribute to help the poor at this time of year? During the Christmas season, how much can we put you down for? And Ebenezer Scrooge says, nothing. I'm not going to give you anything. Right? I'm paraphrasing all this. Right? I'm not going to give you anything. And they say, well, why? And he says, well, I mean, I pay my taxes, right? So we have institutions to which the poor can turn. We have, like he says, like, are there no prisons, right? Are there no workhouses? If the poor are in need, let them turn to those places. And those two charity guys say, well, there are a lot among the poor who would much rather die, right, than turn to those miserable places. And Ebenezer Scrooge says, well, if they would rather die, let them get busy going about doing it and reduce the surplus population, right? That is that's where, that's kind of where Ebenezer Scrooge sounds like Herbert Spencer, and Ebenezer Scrooge and Herbert Spencer sound like another guy named Robert Malthus, and we'll talk about him a little bit later on. Okay. All right. Okay. So society is this competition of individuals all struggling for resources. The fittest rise to the top, right? And they struggle to stay there. And so people who are at the top deserve to be there. People who are at the bottom deserve to be there. Everybody belongs where they belong. Okay. Now, besides society being a competition between individuals, he would also say something like, entire societies are in competition with each other, right? Entire societies are in competition with each other. Within the world, they're in competition over things like resources and so on. Okay. Struggling for self-preservation, okay, struggling for advantage. Okay, everybody good? So that kind of brings us to the end of our original or starting point introduction to Herbert Spencer, who we are now thinking of as a social Darwinist. So in part 2, we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the intellectual influences on Herbert Spencer and on his take on evolution, okay, social evolution. So grab yourself a cup of Joe and meet me back here in a little while. All right. See y'all later.